Avadritam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vajanulambita bhujo kanata bhadato sankirtanai kakitaro kamalaya daksho Vishwambaro dvijavaro yugadharma palo Inde jagatpriyataro karunavataro Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Saharito Bodhaya Pushpavanto Chitra Samdotamo Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Abhaya Charanastako Sukado Paramahado Sundaro Subhadriyo Itam Sutam Brahma Sukhanubhutya Dasyam Gatanam Paradaibatena Mayashritena Naradarakena Sakam Vijaru Kritapunya Punya Oho Bhagyam Nandagopa Brajoshatam Yam Paramanandam Gunabrahma Sanatanam Granuraga Bharato Virahasya Vidya Swapne Pivo Kulavidur Najahati Astam Yoradika Pranayani Jahati Sikta Sheka Tam Prema Vivalatam Subalam Namomi He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Prajapate Gopeshalagopi Kanta Radha Tapta Vancham Gaurani Radhe Radheshwari Vrishabhanusvate Anami Hare Shri Gauri Vaishnava Guru Parampara ki Jai Shri Gopastami ki Jai O Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai Premanandi Good evening, everyone. Today we're gathered for the Gopastami, and speak a little bit about that. Maybe read a couple of poems, as may be the case. But it's an auspicious day, to say the least. This is the day in which the Brajavasis, with some reluctance at first, ultimately caved in and celebrated Nanda Kumar's graduation from calf herding to cow herding. Bhagavatam says that Vatusto Pashupala Pashupala, the two, they became cow herders. This is the 15th chapter of the 10th book of the Bhagavad, which follows the well-known Brahma Vimohan Lila. It covers a number of chapters, 12, 13, 14, really. But in the middle of the 11th chapter of the 10th canto is where Krishna's calf herding begins. This is takes place at the point in the Bhagavad where the community, a nomadic community, if you will, they moved, they picked up from Madhavan and they crossed the Jamuna, floating their bullock carts and milk products, etc., over to the other side where the grasses were greener, and the great Mount Govardhan potentially provided, as scouted out by the elder of the community, the elder brother of Nanda Maharaj, name is
Upananda.
Upananda. There's 5 brothers. Nanda was on the center. Upananda was the eldest. And when the father passed the crown, if you will, and the throne of the kingdom onto the eldest son, which is the tradition, the first act that King Upananda did was to coronate Nanda, pass the crown to him. And so he was the celebrated center of the brothers. But this Upananda had scouted it out and determined that, on the one hand, from a positive point of view, there was so much to gain for the Coward community by moving to Vrindavan and being close to Govardhan, which, as we know, and we celebrated year after year and again this year, provides so much in the way of uh, the necessities for the livelihood of the Coward community and for all of the intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna as well. And on the negative side, of course, in Madhavan, there was so many problems had come. Right, there was the Putana, there was the Chunavarta, the Shakatasura. The last straw was the falling of the Arjun trees, which somehow or other Krishna was not slain by them. They're huge trees, right? So the danger on that side, the negative side as it was perceived, and the positive side of crossing the river. And so they went, and it is at that point, arriving in Vrindavan, that Krishna began to herd calves. And this takes us then through the 11th chapter, the 12th chapter, and at the end of the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, which is the slaying of Aghasura, and of course this all connected with the liberation of the enlightenment, if you will, of Brahma, and then Brahma's prayers, and we come again to the 15th chapter, and a change is noted in that Krishna is described along with Balaram as herding cows. So in this way, the Bhagavatam, in this chapter, the 15th chapter, um, implies that the Gopastami, the celebration that would accompany that, what took place at this time. Again, it's like graduating from grammar school, go to high school, something like that. Now you're going to be with the older kids, and you're older too, and you should be more responsible. Now we're going to call on your intelligence, would be the idea, right? Which is starting to manifest in boyhood, with great pride and boasting about it. It was typical. So Poganda, from Kumar to Poganda, from calf herding to cow herding. And we begin with the cow herding with Gopastami, which is the celebrated the 8th day of the waxing moon of the month of Kartik, on a Wednesday. It happens to have fallen on a Wednesday this year as well. But it was a big celebration in Braj. As I said, it took some time for the elders to acquiesce and give their permission, cave, if you will, to the will of Krishna's friends who had already been given permission, and then into Krishna's will, with the support from Balaram, and ultimately Nanda Maharaj was convinced as well. His brothers, the uncles of Krishna, um, did the initial uh, ministered to him, I should say, by way of convincing him that if your son should become a cowherder, how glorious it will be for you, that your son will be representing you. In other words, he didn't want to think of his son having to go out all day in the forest and be absent from him and so forth. But the brothers, who Krishna at this point began to associate with more closely, his uncles, whenever his father came, they shut up. And so Nanda Maharaj was curious, what's going on? Every time I come, he's spending more time with you now than he is with me. Mm. And this, of course, this is very endearing for the uncles because they can talk to you about things that your father may not talk to you about. It was very comforting to have an uncle like Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj. They tell us things that Prabhupada might not have said. And there's things about our spiritual father as well that we didn't know. Mm. Some deep things also, very deep. Mm. So then the younger of the five brothers brought Nanda Maharaj aside and told him that your son wants to be a cowherder and how glorious it will be for you. As a father starts to think, oh yeah, my son, maybe he'll take up the business, and yeah, that would be good actually. A positive thing, of course. Convincing Yashoda would be another challenge, nonetheless. But that was possible ultimately, and so it was celebrated. But the Bhagavatam, um, as I say, begins to speak about this in the 15th chapter. And that chapter, we find at the onset that, mm, that Krishna begins to glorify Balaram. They're already out and herding cows now, the typical day in the Poganda Lila. The chapter begins with the Poganda Lila and it ends with the Kishore Lila, and it hints in the beginning, very beginning of the text of the chapter, that this Kishore Lila, or the adolescence and the romanticism of Krishna, will begin to manifest even in his boyhood. Mm. And so the chapter is it's it's not like one day after another, but something a typical day, and in the context of that, it waxes from Boganda and ends with Kishore, Leela. But in the text in the beginning, Krishna is identified as Madhava, which is a name for spring, of course, but it's also a name that speaks of him in the light of his romantic life. So it indicates to us that uh, we're going to talk about Poganda here, but it will not be um, um, at the cost of speaking about his romantic life. So we find both in this chapter, and we find, in one sense, this extraordinary virtue of Poganda, which is very dear to the friends of Krishna, his boyhood. Um, it is like the Kumar Lila, only manifest in Braj, nowhere else. So it's a specialty of Braj. His romantic life, his adolescence, this is carried within Mathura, and it plays out in a particular way in Dwarka that doesn't interest us very much, um, with the queens and so forth comparatively. But the Poganda Lila, like the Kumar Lila, only appears in Braj. But the Poganda Lila as well, not like the Kumar Lila, includes his budding adolescence and the beginning of his romantic life. So it's a very special age. And this begins, as I say, at Gopastami. And here in the chapter, then Krishna is depicted as uh, herding cows with Balaram and their friends, and he begins to praise Balaram. He begins to glorify him and bring all the cowherd boys' attention to Balaram. Balaram, of course, as we'll hear, is non-different from Krishna. Krishna is the person, as Prabhupada's language, the personality of Godhead served, and Balaram is the personality of Godhead servitor. So Balaram is equally God, as is Krishna, but he also while he is the object of love along with Krishna for Sakiras, he's also the embodiment of Sakiras and shows the way with his love for Krishna. It is said, incidentally, by Krishna's Kaviraj that the root, the root of the Bhakta Abhiman, the sense that I am a devotee, is manifests from Bhagavan. He's the root of the devotees, the Abhiman, Bhakta Abhiman in every jiva. Someone asked me if all the jivas in this world manifest from Mahavishnu, how could some of them have a swabhav for any Braj rasa? Because Mahavishnu is not from Braj. Or is he? Would be the answer. Mahavishnu is the first avatar. Avatar means avatara. From up, he's crossing Tara, down. There are expansions in the spiritual world, but avatars, they manifest from the part of the Om, from the Vaikuntha world into this world. So Mahavishnu is the original avatar. Krishna is, of course, avatari, the source of all avatars. He's the source of Narayan, and Narayan, from Narayan, so many avatars are coming, the first of which is Mahavishnu. He's actually, technically speaking, Mahavishnu, the avatar of Mahasankarshan. Mahasankarshan is one of the four figures of the second Chaturvyuha, fourfold expansion of the Godhead. There's Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. They rule over all the elements of the Antakar, the Chitta, Buddhi, Manas, and Ahankar. It's complicated, that is, but that Mahasankarshan is the one, as they say, of the second chapter of Vyuha in Vaikuntha. From him, Mahavishnu manifests. Now, their source, the second chapter of Vyuha, is the first chapter of Vyuha. First chapter of Vyuha is Vasudeva Krishna. We see in Mathura, for example. Baldev. This is and then in Aniruddha and Pradyumna in the Krishna Lila. This is in Goloka, right? And the source of Vasudeva Krishna and Baladev are Krishna and Balaram in Braj. So point is what? But you say, but Mahavishnu, he's not. How can someone come from him and have a Golok Swabhav? Because Mahavishnu comes from Golok too. He comes from Mahasankarshan, who comes from Mul Sankarshan, who comes from Balaram. So Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Balaram is the source of the Swabhav, the Bhakta Swabhav of everyone. Well, he's a big guy. It's an important person in our spiritual culture. And in this chapter, Krishna begins to glorify him, addresses him as Bhagawan, praises him before all the other cowherd boys, turning their attention to him more so as the object of love than as the example, Sakyabhav, the object of Sakyabhav's love rather than the example. He's both, right? Now, there's a reason for this, who explained, but in doing this, Krishna speaks in Hasyarasa. From the text of the Bhagavatam, we can draw. Hasyarasa means joking. He's joking. This Hasyarasa is a secondary rasa, And here we find that it's resting on the Mukhya rasa uh, between Krishna and Balaram of Sakya. Mm. Now, the best friend of Sakya rasa is Hasya rasa. Mm. Right? That's his best friend. And it just so happens that according to Rupa Goswami and his rasa theory, teaching, that Balaram presides over Hasya rasa. Mm. He's the presiding deity. Krishna is the presiding deity of Madhurya rasa. Balaram is the presiding deity of Sakya rasa. Mm. But Krishna is now addressing him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and glorifying him by way of saying, oh, just see the trees and their uh, fruits, Arun, they're described, reddish brown, the color of Sakiras. They're bowing before you as you come here in the forest. And the birds and the bees, the bees are buzzing and praising and glorifying you. And the peacocks are dancing for your pleasure. And the earth is jubilant and horripilation, hairs standing on end. The fact that you're now uh, traveling on her like this text says, like never before. Mm. It's a little bit of Bhumi in Parakia. Bhumi is the earth. She's married to Varaha. Mm. Now, but Varaha could not do for her what Balaram's presence could do. Mm. But speak of Krishna. And when Krishna is speaking of Balaram and praising Balaram and glorifying him, one aspect of his jest, his humor, is that in the context of doing that, whatever he's saying about Balaram applies equally to himself, and actually a little bit more so, especially when it comes to romantic life. And in his various verses in which he praises Balaram by describing how the nature and the inhabitants of the Braj in the forest are praising him as seen through the eyes of Krishna. And at the end of that, of course, Krishna speaks about and and the gopis are very pleased with you also. But if we look carefully, we see this applies more to himself than it does to Balaram. Balaram does have a romantic life. That's true. But unlike Krishna, it's very secondary for him. If we look at Balaram through the lens of the Goswamis, we see that the rag of Balaram really applies to his Sakyarasa relationship with Krishna. This is the focus. Yes, some girls fell in love with him. That's true. During what was that, Bela, the holy festival. It's described in the Bhagavatam. But Balaram was not very interested. He was interested in protecting Krishna and chasing after that. What is his name?
Shankachuda.
Later, of course, much later in Dwarka, Balaram was dispatched to go and speak to the inhabitants of Braj about Krishna's, and just pacified them that he would be returning and so forth. And just before he left, Krishna said, and while you're there, you should marry those girls that fell in love with you on that night. This was just not on Balaram's mind at all. Of course, when he comes to Vrindavan, then he meets with the gopis, Krishna's gopis. He represents Krishna very beautifully and in a very compelling way. They feel a little more assured that Krishna will return than they did when Uddhava tried to deliver the message, only to find out that while he thought he was educating the gopis, he was there to be educated himself about the Braj Lila, which is Shrutibir Bimbrikyam. As what does Jiva Goswami say? He says, that trying to think of the Sanskrit verse. He says that the
Dure Hare Katana.
how does it begin? That anyway, he says that the sounds of the Upanishads, the sounds of the Upanishads, that they will bring one somewhere, but that place is Dure Harikatamrita, far from where you will arrive at through Harikata. And where is that? Kampashu Pulakada. He starts speaking about the Sattvika Bhavas that are good in good measure, in large measure, the movements of Braj. They're voluntary movements that are, of course, anubhavs, but involuntary movements. Sattvika Bhavas means in the land of ecstasy. As I often like to say, how did Jiva Goswami describe it? Well, he took from Brahma's words in his Samhita. What is the verse? Ya kanta kanta parama purusha kalpataravo Druma bhumis chintamani ganamayi toyam amritam kataganam natyam gamanam abhivansi priyasaki chiranandam jyotir paramapi tarasvadyam apicha. Just turned on the radio, started dancing, started singing. It says, the verse says, oh, in Braj, in Vrindavan, then all the talking is singing, all the walking is dancing, and so forth. Bhaje Shvetadvipam tamaham gurukun viham. Bhaje Shvetadvipam tamaham gurukun viham. This is known by, he said, very few rare souls. It's a secret. Brahma's opening it up. But commenting on it, Jiva Goswami is frustrated with the attempt of Brahma to put into word what is the nature of that place, as he has done through poetry, by way, for example, of saying the walking is dancing, the talking is singing. So Jiva says, what then must be the dancing? And what then must be the singing? It's way beyond Bollywood. That's where Bollywood comes from, you see. It's a reflection. Bharat ki jai. Yeah, so, extraordinary place, right? That is the point. So, so Krishna, Balaram, and Krishna is glorifying Balaram in praise of him, in jest, in Sashtabhav, in Hasyabhav, and everything he says about Balaram is true about himself as well.
You're saying how Balaram has his own gopis.
Yes, and although he mentions a romantic life with Balaram, he's really talking more about himself because Balaram's romantic life is a very secondary thing. When Balaram went to Vrindavan, having been told by Krishna, and by the way, when you go, you should marry those gopis that fell in love with you. He said, well, let's talk about that later. When he arrived, and he pacified the gopis of Krishna, and they got some courage from this, that Krishna would return. This is Balaram speaking. Like I say, when Uddhava was sent there, ostensibly he went, in his own estimation, to educate the gopis. There is no reason for you or anyone in Braj here to be upset. Separation is just an illusion. He started speaking the wisdom of the Upanishads, you see. Basic Gyan, Atma Tattva, Brahma Gyan. He's speaking Brahma Gyan in the land of rasa. It just doesn't compute there. doesn't compute there. Mm. This is a very dry and uninteresting event or concept, right? As I said earlier in our discussion, see, from the Gaudiya point of view, better off to be in the material world and be conditioned even than to attain Brahman, because your chances for attaining Bhakti Rasa are much greater in this world where there's sadhusanga, the opportunity to love imperfectly. And we think better to love imperfectly than to not love at all. And we're revolting against Brahmasevicha. As I say, it is said the goals of life are dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. 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 Teach your children dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Don't say too much about that or you lose your children. What about the grandchildren? Yeah, that's part of the doctrine, but that's a smaller part at the end. That's just like an appendix or something like that. Trigunya Vishaya Veda. This Trigunya Bhavajana. Krishna says most of it is all, the revelation is all dealing with the gunas. How to move within the gunas for material betterment, which is rather kind of an oxymoron. Material betterment. But there's this quiet other side. The Upanishads are quiet because it's not about movement, right? It's about stillness. It's about that part of ourself, the self, that doesn't move while everything's moving around us, even though we're making it move by our very nature. Consciousness moves matter. Scientists wonder how could that be possible? If it was, we would be able to measure it. That thought betrays how little you understand consciousness. It can't be measured. It's the measurer. You are conscious. That's a big subject, but this Brahmagyan, these statements from the Shruti, Aham Brahmasmi, Tat Tvamasi, Neti Neti, strange sounds. What do they mean? You have to think about them or stop thinking, just vibrate them when they speak to you. That's about the Atma. It's about the Atma and its likeness to Brahman, without much emphasis on our difference from Brahman. Because if there's anything in this world that most resembles God, what is it?
The jiva.
It's us. Consciousness. Spark of that which is the fundamental reality, the theater of all of everything, of all experience. So, but this idea is very distant from ordinary life, but it is also very distant from Goloka. And there happens to be more of a correspondence in one sense between Goloka and human life, because Krishna's Leela is human-like, right? It's called aprakrita, and material life is called prakrita. It looks like human life, but it's different. Krishna is human-like. You have to meditate on both words equally. Human-like means not human also. Not human. Enough likeness for us to be able wonderfully to bond with him when we hear his katha. Dure Hari Katam. Where you can go to the Upanishads is very far from where you can arrive at through Hari Katha. Through Hari Katha, you can bond with Krishna through all of your human emotions, because his life, his Leela is human-like, and he does things that we have experience of, right? We have experience of becoming young boys and young girls and thinking our parents are a little, not worth listening to. They're too old, or they don't get it, or wanting to have some time with our friends. where we could discuss things privately that in the presence of our parents we would not discuss. We have experience of such. We have experience of falling in love as adolescents and so forth. We have experience of the love of childhood for our parents also. We remember our mother's love for us, standing up for us, or what may be the case, right? So when we hear all these leelas of Krishna's human, like how we're emotional beings, and we bond with him through these emotions. Isn't that an extraordinary way of yoga? That could be a yoga. You've seen how friendly bhakti yoga is, how user friendly. Now, if you want to retain Brahman, well, you better strip out. Take off your clothes, wear ashes, right? Head into the Himalayas, tapa, austerity. No, in Gyanmarg, one advances, thought to advance by vairagya. Vairagya means detachment. Detachment correlates with gyan, with knowledge, right? If you have knowledge in the real sense of the term, full sense of the term, then you will forego the pursuit of things that don't endure when in fact you want enduring happiness. That's the math, right? So it's common sense, but then to do that is to move against a trajectory that you've been on for millions and millions and millions of lifetimes of interacting within the gunas, acquiring, so on and so forth. All in Gyanmarg, therefore, knowledge, that's the path of knowledge. One of the ways, or the angas, one of the limbs of the path is detachment, overt detachment, fasting. The Jnani will say on Gopastami, no, I'm fasting. And we will say, aparad. That's stupid. Hmm. So Gyanmarg is very, and the ideal of absorbing oneself in Brahman is very foreign to us. While in Gyanmarg, the way is detachment, overtly cultivating austerity, a detachment, ripping yourself away from the moment, putting on, it's like slam on the brakes. We've been going 100 miles an hour in a particular direction, life after life after life, taking and thus perpetuating our rebirth. I've taken, so now I owe, so I have to take birth again, right? As much as we take, as much as we owe, it looks like we gain, but you read the fine print and you just got in further debt, actually, karmic debt. So, just slam on the brakes. It's very jarring, if you will. But in Myanmar, the way is vairagya. And what is the way in bhakti? It's the opposite.
Raga.
Attachment. That's right. Not detachment. It's attachment. Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastre Koi. Lavamatra Sadhu Sangha Siddhihai. And so powerful is that attachment to a sadhu. Bhagavatam says also, that was Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the same attachment, it says, that you have that is the cause of your bondage. Attachment to things and thoughts about things that are here today and gone tomorrow. That same attachment, when it's transferred to a sadhu, becomes the cause of your liberation. And so much so, Chaitanya Charitamrita says that, as I quoted, Lavamatra Sadhu Sangi Sadhu Siddhai. Just a little bit of association with the Prabhupada, as we were talking about last night. Change the course of your life. It may not bear fruit in the immediate, but the whole karmic trajectory and all the momentum. Now you just put like a cog in the wheel. Right? you will start to slow down, and you will find your interest in the pursuit of things and thoughts about them is diminishing, and just by sadhu sangha, mm, this inward searching, mm, mm, that could not come about for lifetimes of pursuing dharma, mm, and then gradually coming to gyan, just by sadhu sangha can become qualified to pursue such a high ideal that even transcends these sounds of the Upanishad. Mm. Shrotam api Upanishadam dure harikata amrita. The Srotam, the sounds of the Upanishads, neti neti, not this, not that, not this, not that. Mm. As I say, we think I am this, and then we think, no, I'm that, or maybe I'm this. And at 50, I'm still thinking, well, maybe I'm that. It's supposed to stop a long time ago. We're supposed to, in a different social system, one of the virtues of earlier times was that a young boy or young girl would have themselves pretty much figured out materially in adolescence, late adolescence, what their life would be about. Does that sound terrible? Mm. Modern society tries to convince us there are so many options, so many options. You can reinvent yourself again and again. And, mm, it's all delusion, actually. Good to get ourselves grounded, our feet on the ground materially. This is who I am materially. This is my propensity, my nature. Hmm? And got that figured out. So now energy that would have been spent or had been spent wondering what that was can be spent in pursuing my spiritual life, hmm, and who I really am. You see, the modern life is problematic. Transcendence has been lost. That's back in the old world. This was everyone accepted transcendence, and there were so many problems with it, relatively speaking. Maybe people didn't live as long. They didn't have cures for diseases that we have cures for now. They thought the world was flat in some places. Goodness, how much more progress we've made. At the cost of what? Meaning, purpose. What is life? And we're left just to speculate about it or be programmed. It's about this. It's about that. Mm. It's about that. And every click that you make, somebody said, "Oh, that's what it's about." They're responding to you with ads and and so forth. Right? This is not conducive for one-mindedness, mm, required for spiritual life. This is Bogaishvarya. Krishna's Bogaishvarya Prasaktanam Tyabrita Chetasam Vyabhasayatmika Buddhi Natsamadhuna Vidiyate. No samadhi. Mm. No end to the chatter of your mind, and the oppression that it brings about, on which we're slaving, racing, going here and there, here and there. No end to that. Mm. If you could just know the extent to which you actually exist, your mind would stop. Mm. Mm. But we don't. And the chattering is keeping us from knowing. Mm. The yoga is about controlling the mind, right? Mm. But the bhakti way of doing that is very beautiful, as I'm saying. Mm. So when, yeah, um, so when Balaram came to Braj, when Uddhava came, he tried to reason with the gopis. There's no reason to cry. Hmm? People are separated in this world by the will of God. Nothing can be done. Uh, it's His will, whatever He wants. They're looking at him like, well, what are you talking about? Of course, they said, give us that message that Krishna sent. You're reading us. Let us read it ourselves. Then they read it back to him. When they read it back to him, hmm, they drew meaning from it that he could not grasp. Hmm. And then he was left in Braj after speaking with the gopis to wander through the forests for 2 months, mumbling, hmm, Shruti Mrigyam. This place is beyond the Shruti. It's beyond the Upanishads. Hmm. What kind of place is this? If only my Dasya for Krishna, which has is tinged with Sakya, which gives me the pranay to be here in the first place. It could be only if it could be as intense as the gopis I spoke to. That they could just step on my head, or I could somehow get the dust from their feet. Mm. And, mm, this was his idea. But when Balaram came, so Uddhava could not pacify them. He was really there by Krishna's grace that he could understand something about Braj. Mm. That equipped him, by the way, to give good siksha to Gopakumar. Mm. The end of Brihad Bhagavatamrita text, Uddhava says, I can see you are a Braj Bhakt, that is your Swarup, that is your Swabhav. Narad said, yep, wow. That's what they said, wow, something else, right? They had no desire to be that themselves because they're fully satisfied in their own nature. But they knew that's something special. Wow, good for you. They thought, good for you. Mhm. And Narad said, but you really got it, enlightened there about it. So you tell them what to do from here. Of course, he told them, go back to Braj on earth. Mm. Your mantra is taking you so many places, Krishna mantra. Mm. Now we want to go beyond that, even beyond samsara mochana, to Krishna Charan, to the feet of Krishna. Sing your favorite names of Krishna in Sankirtan. And meditation will result from that. Kirtana Swabhave, Kirtana Prabhave, Smarana Swabhave. This was a part of a poem of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Vaishnav K. Who is a Vaishnav? He said, this was his poem. He sat in Nirjan Bhajan, solitary bhajan, for a long time to chant, what was it, a million names or something. It took him so many years. And from that, he got up and he wrote this poem. Vaishnav K. My mind, he said, what kind of Vaishnav are you? You want to sit and do bhajan, but your mind is thinking this and that. You're just imitating the people. He was cautioning against trying to do this. From his bhajan, he came out with the inspiration and insight as to a method by which people could actually enter into samadhi readily. And that is by the force of kirtan. You want to sit and do solitary bhajan, but the power, the prabhava of kirtan, by that, smarana will come naturally. Kirtana prabhave, smarana swabhave. And then he started his campaign of kirtan that included even the extension of kirtan with the drum and kartal, to include the printing press, books circulating around the world, and so on and so forth. This was his idea of kirtan. His sannyasis were called, the printing press was called the Brihat Mridanga, the big drum. And the sannyasis were called Jivanta Mridanga, living drums. Was their idea that they would represent by precept and by example both the purity and the underlying tattva siddhanta of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tradition that had been, vitality of which had been lost to some extent. And he did this at the behest of Thakur Bhakti Vinod. We're all blessed by that. But the gopis, anyway, when they heard from Balaram rather than Uddhava, having been sent by Krishna, Balaram knows the Braj. He didn't need to be educated about Braj. And he's Krishna himself, so he was able to pacify them. They had confidence in him. But Radharani pulled him aside and said, Baldev, Tauji told the brother, one thing, I have one request. Will you marry those girls that fell in love with you during Holi? Because they're just emaciated, without you. Balaram says, well, if Nanda Maharaj, gives his permission. Yeah. So he's not really like champing at the bit, to to marry them, right? Of course, Nanda gave the permission, so he went off and and married them, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur describes his relationship with them as Maryada, not as Rag, but Maryada. It's another name for Vaidhi. So the Rag of Balaram, seen through the lens of the Goswamis, is his Sakyabhav. He is the best friend of Krishna. So while he is the object of Sakyabhav along with Krishna, he's also the example of Sakyabhav. Much to be learned from him about that. And here, in this passage of the Bhagavatam, this beginning part of the 15th chapter, the 10th canto, Krishna is glorifying him so many ways, as I mentioned. The peacocks are dancing for you, and he's suing in Hasyaras. And appropriately so, because after all, Balaram is the presiding deity over Hasyaras. Apparently, he's got a pretty joyful personality. Right? One of the things that the chapter wants to do at this point, Krishna's coming into his Poganda Leela. Interestingly, Balaram now starts to play a significant role. While at the same time, as I mentioned, Krishna's Kishore is starting to manifest, which causes Balaram to go more to the background. Because if the older brother is present, of course, during the romantic life of his younger brother, it may cause the romantic sentiments to be curtailed, and they might contract a little bit in his presence. So here, one of the points, we'll talk about the humor of Krishna here, in which he's speaking. One of the points that Krishna wants to us to gain from this in his glorification of Balaram in humor, by which everything he says about Balaram, all the praise that he gives to him, applies to himself as well. Instead of saying, I'm great, just see how the forest is bowing before me, the peacocks are dancing before me, and so forth. He's not like that. He's not egotistical in that way. This is Balaram. We'll see there, he's speaking about himself, but truth is said in jest, is it not? So the cowherd are hearing the truth in the jest, and they're understanding. Balaram is the perfect, along with Krishna, but the perfect object of love for Sakyabhav. Krishna wants to make this point to them, and he has a reason for doing it. But it's an important point, because there are confusions about who is Balaram. In some Vaishnava sampradayas, they may think he's a jiva, because he's the embodiment, the source of all jiva. The Tatastha jiva is the ashray, the shelter of the Tatastha jiva. That is Mahasankarshan. We mentioned him, right? Who Mahavishnu is the avatar of. In the spiritual sky, then in Vaikuntha from Mahasankarshan, so many Nityasiddha Tatastha jivas are manifest. And in his avatar as Mahavishnu, so many Buddha jivas are manifest. He's the shelter of the Tatastha Shakti. We are a transformation of that Tatastha Shakti. He's a big person. But misunderstanding, if you will, or a certain angle of vision, some texts have depicted Balaram as a jiva, or as an incarnation of an expansion of Seish, rather than the other way around. But in his Krishna Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami has very much resolved this. He was resolute to make clear to us what the Bhagavatam is doing here, through the joking of Krishna, that Krishna and Balaram are equally personality of God. Balaram is not an avatar. In the third canto, the first canto and the third chapter of Bhagavatam, there's a list and description of the number of avatars. That description ends with what? No, it ends with Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. Having mentioned all these avatars, it says, however, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the source. He is Swayam Bhagavan. He's the source of all of them, right? But prior to that, the Krishna avatar is mentioned. Krishna's the avatari, right? But he avatars. He crosses down, right? Right. So he comes in the role of an avatar. But what is it said there about the Krishna avatar? It said it's the Krishna Balaram avatar. The two. When Krishna appears as an avatari, it's the Krishna Balaram avatar. Right? Jiva Goswami makes mention elsewhere that if it weren't for Balaram, Krishna wouldn't have any fun. He's a humorous fellow, apparently. Right? So in Krishna Sandarbha, in a number of ways, Jiva Goswami is uh, makes his argument as to the why Krishna and Balaram. The whole Krishna Sandarbha is about Krishna's two Bhagavan Swayam. It's a whole essay, treatise, on this one line from one verse of the Bhagavatam. But in the context of doing it, that includes Balaram, right? Mm. He says, well, for example, what? He says that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, among the Vishnus, I am Vasudev. Jiva Goswami says, the vibhuti, in the 10th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, among bodies of water, I am the ocean. Among the immovable things, I am the Himalayas. Among big trees, I am the redwoods of California. What he's saying. It's called Vibhuti Yoga. And it's not limited to what he's listed there, because he says, Yad Vimuti Bat Sattam Srimadhudameva Sattameva Bhagat Ramatejo Smasambhavam. He says that God just said something about it. All powerful manifestations of nature are representations of me. Those things that we see, and they just cause us to go, wow, just step back as we approach the ocean. Oh, just see. Or come visit in California. Redwood tree, it's so big, and you're standing in the forest, and it's clear you're not the subject here. You're an object. And the trees are the subject, and the powerful manifestations of nature. That's what happens to some people, and they go on the mountaintop, and they get a view, and they get this epiphany, and then some atheistic people think, yeah, I know what you mean when you think about God. That's what it is. This is just according to the Gita, just a baseline, right, of experience in awe of the power of nature and the smallness of myself. Krishna speaking about this, and in that chapter he says, amongst Vrishnis, I am Vasudev. And Jiva Goswami says, yeah, you could say that Krishna is Vasudev, but Krishna can't say amongst the Vrishnis, I am the Vibhuti and I are the same. So he says, no, he's saying amongst Vrishnis, I am Vasudev, and Vasudev here pertains to Balaram. He's the son of Vasudev. So he's saying, this is one argument. He gives many arguments. He says that in the Bhagavatam, all the way up into the 35th chapter of the 10th canto, Krishna and Balaram are repeatedly described as twins. If you by looking at the grammar, you say they're the same. He says, there was a metaphor that describes Krishna as the moon and the sun, or Krishna and Balaram as the moon and the sun, rather than as the sun and Venus or something like that. And these two are thought to be one. This is his poetic perspective. Ultimately, he concludes, citing a verse from the Bhagavatam, 35th chapter, 10th canto, describes that the markings on the feet of Krishna and Balaram are the same. Not like any other avatar or manifestation. All those markings have been described. They're the same on the feet of Krishna and Balaram. Could be confusing to the gopis. That's another discussion. So the point here, in terms of tattva, the Bhagavatam wants us to understand this tattva. It wants us, that means to say, understand who is Balaram, that we're not mistaken, because that would be a great disaster. Hmm? Now, this plays out very prominently, of course, in Gaur Leela. Hmm? What happened in Gaur Leela? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began his Sankirtan. He got initiated and he became an intoxicated Vaishnav, much to the delight of all of the Vaishnavas. In Navadvip, everybody loved Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, except the Vaishnavas, at least not overtly. They loved him, but they were upset with him. This boy, he's so smart and charming and beautiful. Oh my God. But he's not a Vaishnava. Ugh, we have to avoid him. He's wasting his life. They would try to preach. Murari tried to preach to him. And Mahaprabhu would grab him, say, "What did you want to say?" and electrify him to pray him. And then he would think, "Who is this boy? Who is this boy?" And he said, I will become the greatest Vaishnava. Oh, you egotistical. What kind of so there, what kind of boy are you? That's how they thought of him. But then privately or amongst one of the, if only we could get him in our fold. After he became initiated by Ishwar Puri, he became returned to Navadvip, a changed person, intoxicated by Krishna Nam. So just disheartened all those devotees, right? So they began the Sankirtan. And then one day, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, a great personality has arrived in Navadvip. Haridas, who else? Shivas, go and find him out. They looked everywhere. A great personality. They didn't see a great personality anywhere. They came back. Mahaprabhu said, let me show you. Where we go. We went to the house of Yadunandan, I believe, Acharya. Nandanacharya. Nandanacharya. And there, sitting on a rocking chair, something like that, was on the porch, was the Avadut Nityananda. He didn't look like a great personality. An Avadut looks like, I think we'll avoid him. It's a little crazy, maybe, right? Mahaprabhu then what? He 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 embraced and raised up Nityananda Prabhu. And the devotees then had an epiphany. What they saw was, look at this. Vishnu is holding up Anantasesh instead of Anantasesh, holding up Vishnu. Balaram is, wherever Krishna goes, in all of his avatars, with all of his consorts, Balaram is also present. Three is not a crowd when the third person is Balaram. Is the point. It's his other self, right? So Mahaprabhu then then and on other occasions, he was very careful to advise the devotees, don't misunderstand this Abhadut. He's gone crazy because in Braj, he is restricted from glorifying my Madhurya Rasa-leelas and participating in them directly because he's my elder brother. But now, in this Leela, he can glorify them widely, openly, preach about them to everyone. So he's gone a little mad, intoxicated by the opportunity to praise my Maharas and so forth, in ways that he's restricted from doing in Braj, given the nature of the Leela, but he's the elder brother there. And therefore, Krishnadas Vrindavana says, it's actually Nityananda Prabhu that gave Gopi Bhav to the world. He told everybody, worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is his Sakya Bhav that's playing a supporting role to Madhurya Bhav and helping to circulate it and it be understood. He was an extraordinary character himself, swimming in the Ganga with alligators and so forth. I mean, there's many tales, right, of his extraordinary activities, and he is promoting this idea, right? So Mahaprabhu went to great lengths. When one day Nityananda Prabhu appeared in the assembly naked, just oblivious to his external body, in a bob of a cowherd boy, and all the people went, "Oh my God!" He had his kopans on. But, so what did Mahaprabhu do? Give me your kopans. Then he tore the copins up in little strands. Then he said to everybody, take these copins, this strand, wear it around your neck, and you'll be able to control your senses entirely by wearing the copins of Nityananda. He wanted to teach them who is Nityananda. Samsara, what does Narottam say? Arka Benitai Chand.
Samsara Vashana Mora.
Kavitucha.
Kavitucha Habe. How do we get to Chaitanya Charitamrita?
About the glorification of Nityananda and Balaram, like how Krishna glorifies Balaram.
Because Nityananda came in a dream to Krishnadas Kaviraj. Kaviraj Krishnadas recognized that he was living in his brother's home, and his brother did not understand Nityananda Ram. His brother was a devotee of Chaitanya, but I'm not that Nityananda. So Krishnadas understood, oh, he does not have proper understanding of Balaram. This offense is going on in this house. I will leave. He became homeless. He just walked down. And in the night, on the roadside, Balaram with his friends, his Gopals, Dvarasa Gopals, appeared in a dream, right? And Nityananda Prabhu said, go to Vrindavan, and all your desires will be fulfilled. So Nityananda Prabhu was sent in. Samsara Mochan. Vishaya, for the next verse. That's all.
Vishaya Chadiya Habe.
Shuddha. Being free from Vishaya, material attraction, through the grace of Nityananda Prabhu. Then you can go to Vrindavan. And when you go to Vrindavan, he said all your desires were fulfilled, and that was fulfilled with the writing of Chaitanya Charitamrita. How do we get Chaitanya Bhagavat? Vrindavan says, Nityananda Prabhu appeared in my heart as the Antaryami and told me to write this book. He's a big distributor. Gaur Prem, right? And we see a wave of that in Prabhupada. You can understand, oh my gosh, you don't criticize Prabhupada. This one fellow, he built a big temple on the road in from the Delhi road to Vrindavan, one road. And he made himself out to be a Gaudiya Vaishnava because it looked like the Western people, they like to chant Hare Krishna, so I'll call myself a Gaudiya. But he didn't understand the philosophy. So he hired Chaitanya Goswami, who was one of the Radharamana Goswamis, to be like a pundit. Took him to America and had him preach the Siddhanta and so forth. So Chaitanya Goswami, he told me this. He said, yeah, I knew him. I went there. And he said, he doesn't know anything about the tattva. And then he said, and he criticized Prabhupada. And I told him, you don't criticize Swamiji. Criticize Swamiji, you can never come live in Vrindavan. The road to Vrindavan, when the Krishna Balaram temple opened, the community named the road, the one road in from Delhi. You come from Delhi, there's one road, you turn off to go to Vrindavan. They named it Bhaktivedanta Marg. This is the road to Vrindavan. If you want to take the road to Navadvip, to Mayapur, you have to go on the Bhakti Siddhanta Marg. That's the road name there also. This is our lineage. You want to enter Vrindavan, you want to enter Navadvip, don't find any fault in Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhakti Vinod Paribor, I see Bhakti Vedanta Swami, this lineage. And this was probably was a veritable wave of Nityananda resurfacing in the world. Empowered. So Nityananda, an important person. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to great lengths to ensure that the devotees did not misunderstand Nityananda, who could be misunderstood because he was unorthodox in his behavior, because he was so intoxicated by the opportunity that he was presented with in this new Leela. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Krishna in the depths of Krishna Leela made a commitment to become a sadhu once in a day of Brahma, to try to make up to the gopis for his inability in Krishna Leela to reciprocate in kind for their love, realizing that the measure of their taste of rasa exceeded his own. Pareham Nirabhajasam Dutam. This is the genesis of Gaur Lila. You go deep into Krishna Lila, you find the Gaur Lila. Deep into Gaur Lila, you find yourself in Krishna Lila. Right? So Nityananda Prabhu, then he went even ahead of Krishna. When Krishna came as Gaur, Nityananda Prabhu came ahead of time, set up camp and be ready for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance to assist him. And as I say, just as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to great lengths to ensure that his devotees understood who is Nityananda Prabhu, here in Bhagavatam, we find Krishna is going to great lengths at the onset of the Poganda, Leela, and Gopastami to ensure that the readers understand the position of of Balaram. But he is also not even an avatar. He is a personality of Godhead. If the avatari should avatar, is the Krishna Balaram avatar. So Jiva Goswami thought this was an important point. We do as well. Here it's brought out in the text, right? Now, Krishna is speaking, therefore, in praise of Balaram, although he's doing it in jest, as I said, there's truth in jest. So the cowherd boys, they heard the truth. Krishna's emphasizing, not that they didn't know, but for our sake also, that Balaram is like Krishna, perfect object of love in Sakirasa. But there's another reason for his jesting as well. Because if we study the verses that Krishna employs to praise Balaram, and the very end of them, as I mentioned, he speaks about, and the gopis also, they're of all the wonderful things about you, the gopis, they're they have a special feeling for you. Then even Lakshmi wanted to have that feeling, but actually Lakshmi didn't want to have that feeling for marrying Balaram. She wanted to marry Krishna. He's speaking about himself, and what he's doing is preparing to depart from the greater circle of the cowherd boys in the midst of his Poganda Lila, because the adolescence that I mentioned is also manifesting that time is surfacing. It's midday, and he heard from a messenger that Radharani has come to Suryakund to worship the sun god. It's a chance for me to meet her. So he wants to depart from the greater circle of cowherds. And in order to do so, he's glorifying Balaram so that they'll pay all attention to Balaram and he can slip away. And so the greater balance of cowherd boys, they are all going to go. The Surit Sakas and the Sakas, who are a little older than Krishna, a little younger than Krishna, they're going to go with Balaram and they're going to frolic and be absorbed in him. And now Krishna's going to just fade out of the picture with his Narmasakas, Madhumangal, Subal, Ujjval, and others, right? The Bhav will go with him to assist him. So these larger set of cowherds, they understand on one level that Krishna's joking, but this Narmasakas understand on another level what he's doing. He's glorifying Balaram to give him a good reason to slip out of the picture without anybody noticing. Of course, he's gone for hours, and then suddenly he comes back, and the boys realize, no, actually, you've been gone for a long time. Actually, you've been gone for quite some time. We didn't realize that. But what were you doing? What was? Oh, then he has to make many excuses for that, and help from Madhu Mangal and Subal and so on and so forth. So this is how the chapter of Gopastami begins, and some lessons we learned from that we discussed. Any question? Yes.
I wanted to ask a question about, well, first, thank you, Maharaj. It was remarkable, wonderful katha.
Thank you for listening.
I wanted to ask a question about what you said at the beginning about Prabhupada as the father and Srila Sridhar Maharaj as the uncle. And you said that he shared some things about Prabhupada that Prabhupada himself wouldn't have said. And I'm curious if you would be willing to share any of that.
Well, what I mean by that, among other things, is that Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj knew Prabhupada in a way that we didn't know him. He knew how we knew him, but he also knew him in other ways. He lived with Prabhupada for 6 years. And Prabhupada once said, everything I knew I learned from Sridhar Maharaj, because he was not in the Math learning directly from Bhaktisiddhanta. So he knew him, in a different way, and he gave us historical information and so forth about Prabhupada life and so forth, how Prabhupada came to him and asked for sannyas before going to Keshav Maharaj. But Sridhar Maharaj said, I'm a little concerned. Your wife and your kids are going to come and destroy my moth. We're so close. So he told me that, for example. These kind of stories, on one hand. But another thing, of course, is that I would say that was very substantial, is that it was very common amongst Prabhupada's disciples from early on to, without knowing much tattva really at all, and I was there, so I could tell you, compared to now, our enthusiasm was extraordinary, and we had collectively a unspoken, sometimes spoken, but sense that Prabhupada, of course, is a sucker, is a cowherd boy, because he is, and that was permeated everywhere. And there's so many anecdotes that you can find from the disciples speaking about him and so forth. And so that's one thing, right? Of course, memory of people, that may be, which you can rely on that. But Prabhupada, of course, wrote a poem on the Jaladuta in his private moment, praying to Krishna for the power to accomplish the mission that had been given to him by Bhaktisiddhanta. And in the poem, he expresses his affinity very deeply and very overtly for Sakyabhav. Maybe you're familiar with that poem, right? So that was a poem that was not understood in ISKCON. And to our surprise, Sridhar Maharaj had memorized the poem and began to speak about it. And he gave a very deep explanation of the poem that if you look carefully at the grammar, you see, oh, this is what he's really saying here. And he brought out Prabhupada's Narmasaka Bhav from the poem. And so it was something that was very affirming for those of us who already had that kind of sense without thinking deeply about it. Refined it and so on. In an ordinary sense, he talked about things about Prabhupada that we didn't know, historical facts and so forth. We did this together. We wrote our Bhagavad Gita commentaries together. I showed my commentary to Prabhupada. He said in the 10th canto, the chapter speaking of the Bhagavad Gita, Kesham Satata Yuktanam Vajatam Pritipukam Kadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yena Mamam Puyanti Te. I showed it to Swami Maharaj because I had written something here that was rather kind of revolutionary. You have to study that commentary. And Swami Maharaj said, yes, it must be. It must be. So he would tell us things like this. You can read Sridhar Maharaj's commentary. It's very beautiful. So things like that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
So you can imagine it was very endearing. We felt that we were in the company of someone that really knew Prabhupada on so many levels. On the level as a person, his humanness, lived with him during his family life, knew him in the mission early on in the canvassing days when Bhaktisiddhanta was still present amongst them and so forth, and who knew of ISKCON and his mission, who Prabhupada invited to come for the opening of the Krishna Chandradaya Mandir, asked him to bless the opening. And they sang on the same Vyasa song together, and Prabhupada praised him, and they talked about their history and so forth. Sridhar Maharaj would fill in details and so forth. So we felt on that level, and then in the level of philosophy, tattva, and so forth, that we were in touch with someone that knew Prabhupada on a level that we were not acquainted. So you can imagine how we felt solace and comfort. Prabhupada's campaign was like brilliant as the sun, lighting up the world with Krishna consciousness. But as an absence, it became dark. How to proceed and so forth. And Sridhar Maharaj was like the reflective light of the moon, arising on its own, without anyone pointing to him. Although Prabhupada opened the door to him, you know that, he said, in my absence, as for philosophy, you can see B.R. Sridhar Maharaj of Navadvip. I was massaging Prabhupada's feet at the time. Well, Krishna Maharaj had asked Prabhupada if he should pass away, how will we perform the ritual, the samadhi? He said, that you can speak to Narayan Maharaj from Mathura. And Tamal said, Prabhupada, in your absence, is there anybody else we can consult with? He said, philosophy and my beloved Sridhar Maharaj. Turned out that both of them became good advisors for Prabhupada, but Prabhupada opened the door, cracked open the door, if you will, which was, it may sound, it was very revolutionary for us, because we didn't know anybody but Prabhupada. His light was so bright that other Vaishnav luminaries and so forth were blinded by it almost in his campaign, but he was doing everything. Sridhar was watching, like from the balcony, with great pleasure, and not an ounce of envy, just so happy to see. And then the opportunity to speak to his disciples. Prabhupada brought us through that instruction to his veranda, to his doorstep. He was 80% blind and practically could not leave his veranda and so forth. But then he spoke with us 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon for years, from like 1978 to 1980. What was he passed away? 86.
88.
Yeah. And he was energized also by Prabhupada's disciples, by their extraordinary commitment to him. So we felt very secure, as you can imagine. There, we felt. We were advised, unfortunately, at a certain point by the authorities of ISKCON, kind of a managerial error, I would say. I don't want to fault them, but anyone can make errors. They made a policy that anyone who takes Siksha outside of ISKCON, this was in relation to Sridhar Maharaj, they cannot serve within ISKCON. So that's why I followed the GBC. Which Prabhupada wanted us to do. You see, I got it all covered there. What else?
But I just want to follow up with that. You felt very secure, and the solace also in comparison to the times, 1984, 85 was,
Yeah.
you weren't finding any of that. And
Yeah.
it was a very, yeah.
Well, those who tried to fill the shoes with Prabhupada as acharyas found that it was, not so easy to do. I mean, they didn't ask for it either. So, but of course, Prabhupada had opened the door to have counsel for Sridhar Maharaj, which I think they would have been wise to take more than they did. Whereas, at a certain point, they said no one should go there. And the reasons were just obviously less than spiritual and philosophically correct. So for one who was thoughtful and not led by group think, so to speak, and kind of not like that. So and of course, I'm not the only one who took shelter from Sridhar Maharaj. But Yeah, I mean, I remember once hearing from Guru Maharaj speaking about Mirabai was a devotee, Krishna, but why the Gaudiyas don't consider her like, one of the saints of Gaudiya Vaishnava. Once years ago, the leftist community started a magazine called Clarion Call. It was in the newsstands and everything for several years. But um, I I interviewed the widows of Vrindavan for one issue. I went to one of the leading ladies who there's widow ashrams in Vrindavan. They're all Bengali uh, widows. And their husbands have died, and so they come and live in Vrindavan as sadhus. So I interviewed her, and in the context of the interview, I said, "Is there anyone that you consider like your patron saint of the widows?" She didn't understand what I meant. And so we weren't far from the Mirabai temple, little temple there. I said, like Mirabai. She says, "Oh, no. No. She understood what I was saying. No. And then she said, Vishnu Priya. And I thought, oh, my heart just melted. Like, God, what a fool I am to think otherwise. Of course, Vishnu Priya is left like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, social suicide is the sannyas. So when I was listening with another Kabbalah of Guru Maharaj, we were actually listening to a video of him at the time, and he was explaining how the songs of Mirabai, they don't contain the 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 kind of inclusive glorification of all that are the components of the Braj Leela, Jamuna, the Govardhan, Nanda, and the sakas and the cows, which you will find in the Leela songs of Bhakti Vinod, Narottam, and others, and so forth. He was giving an explanation of that. So anyway, we said, wow, that's just like, this is so like authorized. And then my governor laughed. He said, yeah, that's what I thought. I thought we were really authorized. And they're saying we're like unauthorized. That we want an authority. They're calling us like renegades who don't like to follow authority. So we thought, no, we were looking for authority, and this is a substantial authority. And that's what when Shamarani left to follow Bhaktivinoda Narayana Maharaj, I wrote her and said, "Nice going, the right thing there." Because others who were in that group didn't go. They didn't depart when their Siksha Guru was abused, really, but she went. So I was very proud of her. It was about a decade or more after I had departed. So yeah, it was a troublesome time. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your class. I was wondering, we say that holy name is transcendental, but we know that name of Vishnu is not as potent as Lord Ram's and as potent as Krishna's name. Same with there is Radha Kund, there is Govardhan, there is Vrindavan, Mathura. We make a distinction. And I was wondering if some of the Krishna pastimes which he manifests when he's present in Bhama Vrindavan, on the earth in Vrindavan, is there like distinction in the potency between the pastimes which are manifested in spiritual world? Do we how to say make any distinction like I don't know, that ones are better than other if we can just like materially?
Well, there's a relativity to it that you might say is better. Let me give me an example. If a devotee does not preach, he only does bhajan, and he becomes perfect, is his perfection less than one who preaches and attains perfection? No. Perfection is perfection. But we may think the preacher's better, right? Because as a result of his or her association, we've been able to come into the fold, right? So relatively speaking, so the bhavas that fuel the prakat lila and the aprakat lila are the same. They're they're non-different. Yeah, they're one and the same. Mm. But the Prakat Lila at the same time affords a portal, an opening, right, through which we can enter into the Aprakat Lila. And so let's take, for example, the Brahma Vimohan Lila. The Brahma Vimohan Lila is a Lila in the Prakat Lila that serves as a portal for those in Sakurasa and Vatsalya Rasa who are sadhana siddhas, who have taken birth, they've attained Swarup Siddhi, and so they take birth in the Prakat Lila. But from there, they have to enter the Aprakat Lila. So what are the Leelas then that are special in the Prakat Lila that in the context of the Prakat Lila in general being a portal, that are specifically a portal for the different attaining the different frame in those different rasas and thus becoming qualified to enter into Goloka. So this Brahma Vimoha Lila is one. Of course, it's obvious that it would serve the Sakas well, but Vatsalya Rasa also, because Krishna becomes the son of every mother. Krishna becomes the calf of every cow, and so forth. So when the mothers have Krishna as their son, then this serves as an opportunity to intensify their Vatsalya Bhav, those devotees in Vatsalya Bhav, in terms of the developments from Prem. They've attained Prem, but now there's attainment of Prem, Sneha, Man, Pranay, Rag, Anurag. These are further developments that pertain to different rasas. And some of these elements or developments are relative to some rasas and not others. But anyway, there's a further development, right? So that takes place in that Leela, that opportunity is presented. Similarly, in the Maharas or the Rasa Leela, then we find in the Bhagavatam that some gopis were not able to go, right? So this means that these are sadhana siddhas who the separation becomes so intense at that point, right? That they're taken over the, to the hump, so to speak, whatever, and these this further development of their praying manifests, and then they are fully equipped or eligible to enter Goloka. So in that sense, you could say these leelas are special. Some thoughts. What else? Yes, Ananda.
So you in your Prabhupada Astakam, you mentioned Udaran Dutt Thakur is the patron saint of the Suvarna Varnik, and you had asked this widow in Vrindavan, who's your patron saint? Do you have a patron saint? And so when I was growing up, there were no saints.
No
So
saints?
I came from a Calvinist, like Presbyterian background. There's no saints. And I never prayed to a saint in my whole life. And but I know that
Mine was Francis.
people, Francis, yeah. So fortunate, the Catholics, they pray for the intercession of the saint.
And
So now this is just striking me, wow, well, we could have a saint, and you were saying like Mirabai is just Krishna, there's no
yeah,
saints. So we can have a saint. How do we pray for the intercession? Do we do that? Do we pray for the intercession of the saint? Like Catholics do, or what is this? There's a whole world of that's, possibility that's opening up that I'm, excited about.
well, of course, we have our saints in our Guru and senior Vaishnavas. We have Purvacharyas as well, previous acharyas like Prabhupada, like Bhaktisiddhanta, like Bhakti Vinod. I mean, we're when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disciples were out about in Nadia, Navadvip, then they would be asked what paribar they were from, because all the paribars had a particular tilak marking. Hmm? This was, of course, a later development. It's not that Nityananda Prabhu said, "This is my tilak," and Gadadhar said, "This is mine kind over here." Wait, said, "This is my kind." But as the succession unfolded, then these Goswamis, caste Brahmins, who became Vaishnavas, they would be typically the gurus, because Brahmins are typically the gurus in Varnashram. So characteristically, but of course, who's qualified is what is important. But that was the kind of your first go-to, so to speak. So they, as the time went on, of course, the vitality of the lineage just was diminished to some extent. And when there's kind of like I've said before, let's say you love somebody and you live in the same room with them, everything's great, but then you find out, he likes to stay up late, I like to get up early. He likes, that channel, I can't stand it. So, but you want to keep the thing together, so you make a list. And you both agree and put it on the wall. So still love one another as long as we already follow the rules. Breakdown of love, if you will. So a great acharya, well, he may not have to say as much, do as much, or whatever may be the case, and then who comes after him have to say a lot more to make up for the lack that he is as a realized person, if you will. It's not a bad thing, but this is fairly common. I praise Prabhupada. I couldn't possibly do what Prabhupada did. Traveling. I write books. I've written quite a few, but to travel around the world at the same time and correspond with, tell me about it. Emails are like, oh God, another one. Here we go. It's like these are like to hear it, but it takes time to reply. To think about it, reply, and you're writing a book at the same time, and you're milking a cow too, and so. I don't know, property thing must have had 4 arms. We didn't see 2 of them, but they must have been there at times in Aishwarya. So anyway, um, the Goswamis then they put things like they gave shape. Sanatana Goswami gave some shape to the Sampradaya in Hari Bhakti Vilas. Sanatana Goswami and Gopal Bhatta Goswami. You do this. This is how you do a marriage. This is how you do initiations. This, and you wear Urdhva Pundra Tilak, vertical Tilak, instead of Shaiva Tilak, vertical Tilak, or horizontal Tilak. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in Rag Vartma Chandrika, a book about Rag Bhakti, the role of Tilak. And he says it should be Gopi Chandan. That's all he says. But later on, these caste Goswamis, this is the Nityananda mark. This is like this. This is the Gadadhar Paribar. This is the Advaita Paribar. They call it Tilak Swarup. It's not a bad thing. It's kind of cool, Oh yeah, our Tilak, it's all vertical, but ours has got a dot here. Ours is black. Yours is yellow. Mine's got a broad, like banyan leaf here. Yours has got like a narrow, tulsi leaf, and so forth. So all the party bars, they developed this different tilaks. And then they would see one another and they would understand Vaishnav, Gaudiya Vaishnav, Shamananda party bar, Advaita party bar, so forth. So in our party bar, well, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was initiated by Kishordas Babaji, right? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave him Harinam, and obviously was his Siksha Guru as well. So when Gokishordas Babaji, now he's not a representative of the Sampradaya that lacks some spiritual vitality. He was an extraordinary, avadut. And And so he gave initiation to Bhaktisiddhanta, and I think it's the only person he gave initiation to, and he didn't give him a letter, a Diksha Patra. He didn't tell him this is exactly what tilak you should wear. He said, you will realize your swarup in the syllables of the Hare Krishna mantra. Hari, you know. So some people criticize Bhaktisiddhanta. He wasn't initiated. What's his tilak? He's not wearing the Advaita tilak, you know. And Gorkashore was in the Advaita party bar, and Bhakti Vinod, he was in the Nityananda party bar. Hmm. So they won't be together in Navadvip, in the Nitya Navadvip. They're from different party bars. One's over here, one's over there, so forth. Whether they're together now, Gorkashore used to come to the classes of Bhakti Vinod Thakur and listen to him. So these are nice things, but then they're details that get conflated with principles. Hmm. And then that's what happens to cement your position as a Kanishta. And unfortunately, they can turn into envy of those who know that they're details and employ them or change them as need be to deliver the principle. Hmm. So our pari bar has been criticized by some by, what's your tilak? What's your tilak swarup? Well, let's look in the book. It's not the Nityananda one. It's not the Advaita. It's not the Shamananda. How will you get back to Godhead? It sounds silly, but people misconstrue detail, and they think this is a very esoteric detail, principle, and esoteric. This is how it's been played out. There are books written of these kind of criticisms of Bhakti Vinod and Bhaktisiddhanta. They're actually silly. What they really represent is the very thing that Bhakti Vinod talked about, differentiating between a Varavahi Vaishnava and a Saravahi Vaishnava. This latter, Saravahi, means a Vaishnava will understand the essence. And a Varavahi was one who misunderstands the essence, conflates details with principles, and then argues over the color of your cloth or the design of your tilak as if it's a make or break. I've experienced it. Go to a particular party bar, and they say, "Well, that's their uncle to be bag." So anyway, it's an unfortunate thing. But anyway, at the time of Bhaktisiddhanta, my point is that persons would ask, innocently enough, I suppose, what party bar are you from? So they asked Bhaktisiddhanta, how should we reply? And he said, you tell them the Bhakti Vinod party bar. Bhakti Vinod party bar. So that is our sage patron saint. Bhakti Vinod is the patron saint of our party bar, so to speak. He's the seventh Goswami, right? And well, anyway, they have their silly arguments to it, but he is who he is, and we're all here because of the campaign that he asked Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to follow through with, which he did very successfully. And so, in that sense, we have a patron saint called Bhakti Vinod. Jai Bhakti Vinod, Jai Bhakti Vinod. But so we have purvacharjas, and then there may be someone in Gaur Leela who you read about and you identify with, you like, and you might identify with him. Ultimately, of course, in the Leela, we will follow somebody, right? If you're Narmasaka, this is your Swabhav, then you'll have a group leader like Subal, Ujjwal, Subahu, and your guru, in this case, Prabhupada, for example. And you have a group leader from the Gopi sector also, like Vishaka. So these could be considered patron saints you can pray to, all the members of the Leela. So as you progress, then some identification with them in some way will come, and you have a saint. Does that help?
Yes, but how do you pray to a saint?
Sincerely.
What do you pray to a saint?
Well, Prabhupada played a Rupa Goswami, that he could that he could serve his guru um, in a way that would be pleasing to Krishna. So that's how we pray. That will get please my gurus by more than one, which is possible. This would be very pleasing to whomever you pray. They say, "Oh, he got it. She understands. He deserves the blessing." Right? What else? Yes.
Guru Maharaj, you mentioned how different devotees in the same situation will react differently, and that's because of the svabha.
Yeah.
And we know that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had many very qualified disciples. You mentioned, of course, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, that even Srila Prabhupada considered his Shikshra Guru, like the Pragan Keshav Maharaj.
Yeah.
Some of them were directly asked to go to the West and preach, whereas Prabhupada was only suggestion if you can preach in English language. So even before Prabhupada departed to for his preaching mission, you mentioned also that he had this very strong confidence that he will do it, like he will go and spread the holy name. So I was thinking the fact that he could do it, there's many elements that can be understood here, like for example his complete surrender, the thing that he could understand the heart of his guru, desire of his guru, but also is it also perhaps maybe because the svabhava was actually coming up to the surface and he was able to feel that confidence and talk to Krishna in that way and kind of asking for help to do that?
Well, of course, it's what Bob was on the surface. You know, he was a Prema Bhakta. So I don't know really what you mean by that, but
Sacred confidence or something.
confidence is of course central to Sakya-rasa, but I think that what I was saying, what I was saying the other day is that and it's true that people who met him in Vrindavan before he ever became the famous person that he is, they just felt like, you know, he had this vision, he was going to do it somehow or other. They couldn't imagine how it would possibly happen, but they admired his Guru-nishta, so to speak. Where is the Durnishta coming from? Where is the conviction coming from? You know, it's coming from his sincerity, his devotion, from his, it's coming from his svabhava also. Yeah, that was what he was. He took his guru's suggestion as an order, right? That's what he did. That's all, you know, a very higher arrangement. All the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta, they're extraordinary in their own way. All right. Well, very nice to be with you all. Gopastami ki jai. Bhakti Vinod Paribar ki jai.
Yay.
Bhakti Vedanta Tripurari Maharaj, Srila Guru Maharaj, ki jai.
Jai.